Before we begin, there is going to be full-fledged spoiler talk for Star Wars The Last Jedi in this video, so if you have not seen the movie yet, please come back after you have done so, as I don't want to be responsible for spoiling any major reveals to anybody before they've seen the movie. I think there's a few things in Star Wars The Last Jedi that, at least for the time being, are being left up to interpretation, and probably none more so than the scene with Rey in the cave below the island of Ahch-To. If there's one singular aspect about The Last Jedi that could be labeled as different, it is definitely this scene, but not in a bad way, more so one that's just maybe confusing to some people and doesn't initially make sense. Because of all that, I wanted to share my interpretation of that scene, but I think to fully understand that scene, it's important to go back and look at just how much weight Rey has put on family and sense of belonging throughout the film and a half that we've had with her leading up to that scene. So let's recap. Going back to early in The Force Awakens, Rey mentions to BB-8 that she's waiting for her family to come back. She says they'll be back, with a sort of reserved confidence, but then sprinkles on an obvious bit of doubt when she finishes with, "one day." Fast forward to just after Finn and Rey have escaped from Jakku and are talking about getting BB-8 to the Resistance base. Rey mentions that she'd drop off Finn and BB-8 but wouldn't go with because she has to get back to Jakku. Then a bit later, when Han offers her a job on the Falcon with he and Chewie, she says she's flattered, but she has to get home to Jakku and that she's already been away too long. Essentially, in her repetitive life as a scavenger living alone in the Jakku desert, her family returning seemed to be her beacon of hope for things to eventually get better. So much so that even when a whole new adventure fell into her lap with Finn, BB-8, Han, and Chewie, her top priority was still fulfilling that idea of finding happiness and purpose from her own family. After her Force vision in the basement of Maz Kanata's, Rey is brought to tears with emotion when Maz tells her that she can see in Rey's eyes that she already knows the truth, that whoever she's waiting for on Jakku is never coming back, and that the belonging she seeks is not behind her, it is ahead. And even still, when faced with the idea of taking the lightsaber and moving ahead on this new path, she runs from it. Runs into the forest where Kylo Ren captures her, and from that point, she's sort of involuntarily thrown into the mix even more. It seems that she doesn't finally start looking ahead until she's reunited with Finn and Han on Starkiller Base. And we can see just how meaningful this is to her. She's completely blown away that Finn would come back for her, and for the first time pretty much in her whole life, she's felt a sense of belonging from somebody else. Now, finally getting back to The Last Jedi, let's take another look at Rey's situation. Last she knew, Finn, her closest friend at this point, was basically comatose. Han, her closest thing to a parental figure, was dead. And Luke, her next hope for a mentor, doesn't seem to want much of anything to do with her. So Rey is still troubled with the thoughts of what her purpose might be, where she came from, and what her role in everything will eventually become. And when she looks down that dark hole, she can't help but think that there are answers of some kind down there. Once she gets there, what she sees are dozens, if not hundreds of reflections of herself, both behind her and ahead, all repeating one another's actions. So what does this mean? What was this scene trying to convey about Rey? To me, this symbolized to Rey exactly what she needed to know about herself in order to let go of any baggage or worry that she's still carrying with her from the past. Who Rey is, both through the repetitions of her own past actions behind her and who she will be moving forward, are purely a result of her own self. She says during that little vision that after all those repetitions, she knew there was an end, and behind that last obscured wall, she gets her answer about as clear as can be. Who she ultimately is purely a reflection of herself, and no one else. She's not defined by her parents, she's not defined by Han, she's not defined by Luke, she's only defined by herself. And by finally letting go of that worry about where she came from, she can finally start to move forward. In other words, let the past die. Kill it if you have to. That's the only way she can become what she was meant to be. By the time Rey has gone into the cave, she's largely convinced that Luke isn't going to offer her any of the belonging that she's seeking, and starts to more actively forge her own path based on what she actually sees in herself, rather than what she's been hopelessly looking for. Now, I obviously speculated a ton about Rey's parents 2 years ago on this channel, and even had my own crazy theory about who they might be, and even though it was debunked pretty quickly, it was still fun to speculate on and try to craft some kind of theory about it all. In the end, I'm totally satisfied with the direction they went with things, and I think as time wore on, it became clear that that was sort of the logical direction to go, with her parents being essentially nobodies. And I also liked how they revealed it, kind of in that moment of tension, and discounting any weight that Rey had put on it, just kind of saying they were nobodies, stop worrying about it. I like that the filmmakers aren't trying to take every new character and somehow connect them with characters of old. I think the final scene of The Last Jedi further illustrates this, with the idea that even a lowly stable boy or a desert scavenger from Jakku who has no ties to anybody of significance can eventually be powerful and eventually be significant in their own way, just because of who they are, their desire to do good, and the fact that the Force isn't limited to just particular bloodlines. Anyway, on the whole, those are my thoughts on the scene with Rey in the cave. If you have any other thoughts of your own, or anything to add on to my thoughts on the whole thing, please feel free to share them in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button, because I always appreciate that. But above all else, everybody, thank you so much for watching.